Hey folks, welcome back. This is Joel, and in this video we'll be talking about a new tool called as Containerlab, which is used for creating virtual network topologies, right? So in my previous videos, you might have seen me use EVNG a lot, which is my favorite tool. But unfortunately, this weekend I don't have access to my server. I just had a Mac laptop, and I wanted to quickly lab out few things, and I was just exploring what's my best option here, right? So the tools like EVNG, GNS3, right? So these are very much well suited for your traditional operating systems, network operating systems, which are x86 based, right? Be it your Cisco IOS XE, IOL, and all this VM based, right? There's a list over here. In fact, you see here the list over here, right? Your Nexus, XR, and some of these operating systems which are very VM based, right? So they work very well with EVNG, and then EVNG also has this capability where you have a GUI, right, where you can drag and drop your nodes, create links, and your topologies up, right? So those are all great things about EVNG. But then there are a bunch of vendors nowadays who are also coming up with container based operating systems, right? And that's basically over here. We can see you have like Arista, cEOS, Nokia's, SR Linux, and a bunch of them. So Containerlab is a tool which, the end goal is very much the same. The end goal is to create like a digital twin or a virtual topology so that you can you can practice, you can test, you can do whatnot, right? The end goal with Containerlab or EVNG or GNS3 is still pretty much the same, but Containerlab is very much suited for container based operating systems, right? That doesn't mean that you can't run VM based. You still can run VM based operating systems. As you see here, you still can support the VM based ones. But if your topology is predominantly using VM based virtual machine, VM based OS, I would suggest you to look at EVNG or GNS3, because there you get little bit more ease of use. You get the GUI, right? In Containerlab, that's a problem. You don't get like a GUI where you can drag and drop the nodes. Rather, these guys, or this tool basically uses a more of a declarative method of defining the topology, right? So you have a YAML file where you define the nodes and the connectivity between them, and then you deploy the topology and it comes up, right? So why am I telling you all this is because this is a great tool. I'm pretty sure you will find use cases for this, especially for if your organization is kind of like using a lot of or is doing a lot of net DevOps, right? And you are network testing, and all of this is part of like a pipeline. You have a CI/CD pipeline and all of that. Then this particular tool would really fly over there, right? Because when you have like an automation pipeline, right, then you really need tools where you can declare and you can deploy and you can shoot things up, right? So that's where Containerlab really plays. Now for me, my main use case was because I'm using a Mac laptop, right? And the problem with the Mac laptop is the later generations of Mac, right? They are ARM based, right? ARM architecture, right? The Apple Silicon, not the Intel one, the Apple Silicon, they are ARM architecture. And because they are ARM architecture, your VM based, right, network operating systems, these are all x86 architecture. So it's not really going to work very well on these laptops, right? So I was looking for something which would really help me deploy these operating systems natively on my Mac laptop, and that's where I came across Containerlab. So this is like a specific use case of mine, but that doesn't mean, I just want to reiterate, doesn't mean that Containerlab can be used only for container based operating systems. You can still use it for VM based. You can basically think of it as you can do everything what you could do with EVNG and GNS3, except you just don't have a GUI, right? And plus you can do a lot with the containers, right? Think just take that as a big takeaway from this. Okay, cool. So I'll stop talking now, and I'll start mainly stop talking about the whole reason why we're doing this. Now let's get into how to do this, right? So the idea is, like I said, we're going to be putting Containerlab on my Mac laptop. So let's start with what's our end goal, right? So it's good to have a game plan, right? So what's our game plan today is we'll just create a very simple topology, right? I'll have two nodes, let's call it C1 and C2, right? I'll have a link between them, right? I'll probably put a IP over here, I'll put an IP over here, and I'll show you that I can ping both of them. So this is my goal. I'll just create a 2-node topology, put IPs on the interface, and I'll show you I can ping and connectivity is good, right? And the operating system of choice for today is Arista's cEOS, right? The container based EOS, which Arista has, right? Like I said, there are a few vendors out there who are having container based operating systems. One is Arista, and the other one is you have Nokia and few other guys, Juniper, Cisco. They also have their own versions of it, right? So this is really going to fly. Containerlab is really going, you're deploying this mainly for container based operating systems, right? So this is really going to fly with it. Okay, so this is our goal, right? So how do we get there? Step number 1. Okay, step number 1. We are on a Mac laptop, by the way, remember. So we are on this is basically for a MacBook, right? Especially the Apple silicon, right? Based is what I'm using. I just want to make sure, right? Containerlab, by the way, can be installed on a Windows laptop. You can install it on a Linux VM. You can directly install it bare metal on servers. You have different installation methods, right? My use case is this one. Doesn't mean that you have to do it only on Mac. You can do it in multiple places. Very similar to EVNG, right? You can install it in different places. My use case is because a MacBook, and for a MacBook which is running an Apple silicon, I would say Containerlab is the best way for you to virtualize images, because natively it supports all these container based images, right? So you don't have to worry about x86 architecture running very slowly on your laptop. Okay, so step number 1, what do you need in that case? We first need to install a tool called OrbStack, right? So this is like a tool which with which you can actually create containers, VMs, and all of that. In our case, we'll basically use OrbStack as a tool to create a step number 2 is what? We'll be creating a VM. Okay, we'll create a VM. It can be Ubuntu VM, Debian, whatnot, right? The step number 3 is install what? Install Containerlab, right? So we'll be installing Containerlab, where we'll install this guy inside the VM. That's basically step number 3. Step number 4 is we will need to obviously download, and we'll have to kind of, I wouldn't say install, but we will basically need to get this Arista's image, right? The cEOS image, right? We'll have to get this. We'll have to spin this container up, basically, right? So this container needs to be up. So that's step number 4. And the last step is the topology, right? Create the topology and deploy it. That's it. And the topology will be up. So these are like the 5 steps which we'll be doing. Let's start with step number 1, right? So let's start by installing OrbStack. Okay. So coming here. So by the way, again, I just also want to make sure I let you know that installation of Containerlab on MacBooks itself, there are again multiple ways to do it. You can do it using dev containers, you've got dev pod and other ways to do it. I'm just taking you through something which I find very easy, right? And I felt the learning curve over here might be very less. So this is a great way to get introduced, but go ahead, go crazy after watching the video. There is a very good, there is a section, in fact, Containerlab on macOS, and you'll find all the various ways you can do it. I'm just doing like one of the simplest way, using a VM. Okay. All right. So coming back. So like I said, step number 1 is to install like the OrbStack. So OrbStack can be installed directly. You've got to go to obstack.dev, right? And you can just hit the download button and then click on the Apple silicon. In my case, it's Apple silicon. If you have an Intel based, you can do the Intel based, right? So I'm going to download this and I'm going to install, and I'm going to come back in like 2 minutes. There you go. So I have installed, OrbStack on the laptop. You can see you can use it for creating containers and everything, right? In my case, I'm just going to use it for creating a VM, right? So I'm going to click new, right? You can give any name. I'm going to give it as Containerlab, cLab, right? You can keep it as Ubuntu. In my case, I'll just move to maybe Debian. Bookworm is fine. This is like a subversion of Debian, and CPU type is Apple. I'm going to hit the create button. Look at how quickly it's able to create a VM, right? That's the cool thing about OrbStack. You can see I just clicked it, and maybe in another 10 seconds it should be up. There you go, it's already up, right? So the VM, what we just now did, I think it's really cool. I mean, we just clicked the button and you got a VM up and ready, right? Not just a VM, but you'll see some really cool use cases with this one, right? So let me just show you that. Right, so let me just grab my terminal over here, right? So if you want to SSH into this VM which I created, right, all you gotta do is just write SSH auth. There you go, right? We are already inside the C lab now. You can see here, that's my name, that's my username, and that's C lab. So we are already inside. So Obstack really simplifies a lot of things, right? So if you had to do this otherwise, right, you will have to probably create a username, password, you will have to create maybe our certificates and set up SSH and all of that. But you see Obstack has just gone ahead and kind of like simplified all of that, right? So if you want to like look at what is the operating system, you can look at that. So it is etc OS release, and you can see it's nothing but the bookworm Debian release which we installed, right? The kernel probably is going to be something custom. So you can see it's an Obstack based kernel, but it is running on Debian. Okay. Now, so let's come back to our steps. So what do we do? We basically finished this step. We finished this step, right? Obstack installation is done. VM installed. Now let's go and install Containerlab, right? So where do we get Containerlab from? So in the Containerlab's documentation, you'll basically find installation, and here if you scroll down, you have basically one line, right? So you're just gonna copy this guy, right? This will do the complete installation. All you have to do is copy this, and sorry, my bad, let me do that again. Okay, let's come here, let's paste that, and let's go. All right, so this will take a few seconds, right? Maybe let me pause the video and come back once it is done. There you go. The installation of Containerlab is completed, right? So now before we actually, move on to the next step, which was what ideally it was supposed to be. Let's actually go and mark this thing done, right? So we have installed Containerlab. This is completed. Next was actually going and getting us the Arista's image. But before that, let me actually show you some of the other use cases of this Obstack, right? Because it's really cool. So VS Code, I think most of you guys would have probably used VS Code or any sort of an IDE, but I use VS Code, right? And in VS Code, what you've got is you can go to extensions and you can probably get something like a Remote Explorer extension, right? So let me show you that, yeah. And then hit the install button and boom, it's already installed, right? So now you can see, so I've installed it, and as you see here, it is able to already kind of like show me that, I can SSH into the Obstack VM, right? And I think some of these entries are showing up because I've done this in the past, but at least what you should be getting is SSH, and at least it should automatically discover the VM, right? So in my case, I'm just going to go here and click on this plus button. So what it is doing right now is it is trying to SSH right into the VM, right, which I already showed you earlier as well. I showed you how to SSH, right, using just SSH auth. But I'll show you the actual use case of this. So now that it is, it's SSH'd into it, I can mount volumes, right? The reason is because, remember I told you at the end of the day, we'll be spinning up a topology, right? And the topology in case of Containerlab is a YAML file, right? And that YAML file currently is residing on my Mac laptop. It's not inside the VM. It's actually residing on my Mac laptop. So how do I mount that volume or that file, right, inside the VM? Pretty simple. So you see, I just SSH'd, and now I can do an open folder here, and I can directly, search. You can see I can mount. This is actually my Mac laptop, right? So you can see users, Joel, and I can get into my documents folder, Containerlabs, and click OK, right? There you go. So in fact, the Containerlabs topology file is over here, right? So this is how it looks. You will find a bunch of these examples again on the Containerlabs website. So in fact, you could come down here and you'll find something called as lab examples here, and you will find a bunch of these examples for different type of operating systems. I just picked probably, I think this guy, right? I just picked SR Linux and cEOS, right? So this one is what I picked and kind of modified it a little bit to kind of show you how to run two. This is actually a topology for one Nokia device and one Arista device. I just modified this to kind of show up as two Arista devices, right? But that being said, you've got like bunch of examples. So I just picked one of that topology file, and this is how it looks, right? Very simple. You just need a name for the topology and what are the nodes inside it. This is a YAML file, right? This is a YAML format, right, of defining. You use indentation to kind of define. Right now, this is a topology file, and like I said, there are going to be two nodes, right? One is cEOS 1, another one is cEOS 2. Kind is actually, again, nothing but an attribute which they use to define what is the, think of this as in EVNG, remember we had to create like a folder of the, image and then dump the files inside it. Very similar to that. This is like for Arista, this is like a fixed, what is the type of the image, and then the name of the image is also important. I'll tell you how to get to this in a minute. But and then at the bottom you can see the links are defined. There are a few other attributes which you can define, right? Obviously, but I mean, I'll actually show you the documentation where you can do that as well, right? So, all right. So let's also get the terminal over here. I think it's this button. Okay, there we go. So you can see here, I'm basically nothing but this is actually I'm inside the VM, right? And I mounted the folder from my Mac laptop. There's also a small trick here. I think these guys have it over here. Let me just find it. I think it's in the installation page where, yeah, so you have, if you want to kind of shorten that whole, instead of having such a huge prompt, you can shorten it and it'll appear like a small this thing, right? So we can do that by just running this one command, right? So let's do that. Let's come here, let's paste that and enter, right? And maybe let's get this guy once again up. Okay, there you go, right? So you see now the prompt has become like much smaller, right? Just a visual thing, cosmetic thing, but is not mandatory, right? But anyway, so where are we right now? We were looking at the topology file, right? The next step is very important. We need to get to the image, right? Now, like I said, I'll not be able to provide you the image, but whenever you have some doubts regarding, what image, what you really need, right? What type of an image you need, what you need to do is here in the documentation, there is a separate section called kinds, right? And on the left hand side, you'll find all the information about the images, right? So let's go to Arista, let's go to cEOS. And here you can see it tells you exactly what image you need, and it also tells you sometimes how to go and get that image, right? So for the cEOS image, right, the container based EOS, right, it is basically over here. So you need to go to the downloads page, and over there you'll basically get the image in this particular format. It'll be a you should be very careful. You need to get the 64-bit image, right, the 64 one. And then remember to get the .tar.exe file, something like this, right? In my case, I've already downloaded that image. In fact, I think this is 4.32. I've gone and gotten maybe one version better, right? So that's what you'll basically see over here, right? So you can see in the images folder, I have the image 433.2f is what I have, okay? So that basically means I think I'm ready to actually now install the image, right? Inside where? Inside the Containerlab. Remember again what I'm doing? I have mounted this folder inside my VM, right? This folder is actually residing in my Mac laptop, not inside my VM. But I've mounted it so that I can like consume all the files from there inside my VM, right? That's a cool thing about, how you can do this. All right. So let's do this. So what do we do now? So we are inside console. Let's get into the images folder. Okay. And all we have to do is docker import, and let's import the image, right? Which is cEOS, I think capital EOS, right? And when you're importing, you need to import it with a name, right? So I'm going to be importing it. This is the significance of the name. So you need to make sure it matches. So I'm going to be using this. So yeah, there you go. So I'm hitting the import. It'll take a few seconds. Let's wait. I'll probably pause and I'll be back once this is completed. There I go, it's done. You can see the image is installed. Now the only step, let me see if I can increase the size of the font over here. Give me a second. Never mind, I couldn't find the settings. I'll probably figure that out later. But for now, hope this is relatively visible, right? Let me clear the screen a little bit over here. Okay, so we've got, like I said, we kind of installed the image, right? Now let's probably get inside the other folder where my topology file is residing, right? So this is where my topology file is. So what I'll be doing now is simple, just deploy the topology, because I have everything which is needed, right? I know the two nodes, I have the image ready, right? And I also have the connectivity defined here. So what I'm saying is the device 1 and device 2, they are going to be connected to each other using the ETH1 interface. So all you got to do is sudo clab deploy. Simple. There you go. It's deploying the topology right now, right? The two node topology which we want is getting deployed. Let's wait for that to finish, and it is completed, right? You can see the two nodes which are created, the image information, state is running. It's also gone and given us management IP address for the management interfaces, right? So if you want to learn a little bit more about the Arista image, you can look at the image here, right? So they give information. You can see the interface mapping as well, right? So you see Ethernet 0 is the management interface, and this basically gets the IP address from the Containerlab network, and the data interfaces are basically starting from ETH1, right? ETH1, ETH2, ETH3, so those will be your data interfaces, right? You can also change the mapping. So all the information regarding a particular image, right, will be present in this particular page. So if you want to kind of do some changes, you want to see some customization, you can come down to this particular page, right? The kinds page, which is over here, right? So you come to the kinds page, and you can come to the section of the image, and you can read about it, right? In our case, we are not going to explore a lot on that. What we are going to go back and do is, we've actually got the topology up and running, right? So how would you kind of connect to these devices, right? How would you connect to it? Pretty straightforward, right? So you can take the host name from here, either from here, or I think this is really small, so I'll show you directly from the VM, right? So from the VM, let me clear the screen a little bit. So all I have to do is SSH. For the Arista images, you have to use the username as admin and the host name, right? There you go. And the password is also admin. And we are already inside, guys. We are inside the whole, device number 1. Let's actually go and configure that interface which I was talking about. So I'm going to do conft interface ETH1. Okay. And what we'll also do is no switch port. IP address is say 10.1.1. And let's put a no shutdown, right? There you go. I'm not going to save the configuration. I'll show you a way to kind of save the configuration using Containerlab. I mean, I could have done simply write memo here, yes, but there is another way to do it, right? So I'll just keep this as it is. Let's move on to the second device, right? Let's see if we can connect to the second device as well. Sorry, let's get out of here. So the second device is just 2, right? Password is admin. Enable conft. Let's put the IPs, right? Interface ETH1 again. No switch port. IP address is 10.1.1.2. 255.5.0 and no shut. There you go. No shut. Right, so we are done. We can now exit. Before exiting, I can also run the show commands and show you. Show IP interface brief. Right, there you go. So the management interface IP was given directly by the Containerlab network, but then you can see the Ethernet 1 interface which is there, right? I can also ping the other device. Let's see if I can ping 10.1.1.1. There you go, the ping works, right? You can do basically anything and everything, right? You can set up your, VXLAN, EVPN, you can do L2LS, L3LS, VXLAN, whatever topologies, right? Whatever features are supported on these OSs. I mean, obviously, there will be some features which will not be supported, which are only supported on the hardware, right? Always the case, like things like cEOS and all of that. That's the case with every vendor. But whichever features are supported, you can configure and you can test it out, right? Cool. So let me just come out of here, right? Exit. So remember, I have not saved the config, right? Keep that in mind, right? Meanwhile, let's explore a little bit here, right? So I'm switching back and forth, but ideally you can do it from either place, right? So here what you can do is, if you want to again have a look at this, right? Imagine I just did a clear screen and it went away, right? If you want to again look at your topology, you can actually do, in fact, let's do sudo clab enter, and you can see all the various combinations or various parameters, right? So for example, you can use sudo clab inspect, right? That will give you the tabular format of your topology again, right? So that you get to know what are the nodes, what are the images, IPs, and so on, right? You can also inspect at the interfaces level. So you can do inspect interfaces, and you can see the interfaces of both the devices are showing up, right? So the ETH1 interface is up because that's where we configured ETH1 and ETH0, right? The management, and this rest of the interfaces are down. Makes sense, right? The next cool thing is you can also do something called as, you can create a topology as well, right? You have two nodes, so let's see if we can create a topology, right? So you can do sudo clab graph, and it then gives you like this IP address, which you can sorry, I think I made a mistake. Yeah, you can click and that would just open up on the browser like this, right? There you go. So you can, if you have a very complicated topology, many nodes, then this would be really useful, right? You can drag drop it and you can like look at the interfaces and so on, right? Like I said, in EVNG you can actually create the topology using drag and drop, but here all you can do is you can look at the topology, that's it, right? So this is a good feature as well. You can actually do, I think, horizontal layout, vertical layout, bunch of things, fun to play around with this. Okay, coming back. So let's stop the topology, and what else can we do? The cool feature which I was talking about, right? So what you can also do is you can, let me just clear the screen. You can also do sudo clab. You can do save, right? So what it is going to do is, remember in this folder we've got what? Let me actually do a ls over here. So in this folder, remember we've got the we've got the file, right? So we've got the file, the topology file. So the moment you do sudo clab save, right, it will save the configurations. So you don't really need to go to individual device and save. You can see it is saving the configurations of both the devices, right? And I'll show you this cool thing. So what I can do is, at the end of the day, once your work is done, you can just go sudo clab and destroy, right? And I'm going to do that, and see, the topology is now destroyed. Okay, the topology will not exist anymore. And in fact, you can double check that. You can run the again same command. You can do sudo clab inspect, right? And earlier we were getting that table over here on the top, but you're no longer getting the table, right? Because the topology doesn't exist, right? But because you have saved the configuration, say you went to get a coffee, or maybe in the evening you want to like play around something, you can redeploy, right? Or you can just, there's a command actually called redeploy, but then you can just do sudo, again you can do just sudo clab deploy, right? Let me just clear the screen. So if you just do sudo clab deploy, this time when it deploys, it will fetch the earlier configuration. You can see here, configuration will not be reset, generated reset. So you can see it is using the configuration from the flash. So all your work is saved, right? Say you did some work in the morning, and you have to go to the office, you shut down the topology, and then maybe in the evening you want to kind of test something, you can just deploy the topology back, because you destroyed it in the morning, but you have saved it. So this time you again deploy it once again, and the topology should be up. So let me show you that once. Okay, there you go, it's up. So this time let me again go back to the device, right? So here, let me connect into the device, maybe device 1, right? And password is admin. And let's see if I have the IP interface, right? There you go. 10.1.1 is what we had configured. it is present, I can still ping the other device, right? Pretty cool, isn't it? So yeah, that's like, I mean, I think I just wanted to cover a few things. There are obviously a lot of other things which you can play around and you can get a gist of it. Coming to our checklist of things, we finished, we got the image, right? And then we created the topology, and once we created the topology, we were able to configure the devices. We also played around with some of the features, right? So that's that's basically what I mainly wanted to cover. I wanted to mainly show you guys how to kind of use how to kind of use Containerlab, right? How to kind of get started. So the documentation is very well created over here, right? You have information about what images are supported, right? Installation is present, installation guide is present. You can see on the right side there are different ways to install on different environments. You can have a look at that directly on the Linux or as on the Mac, on Windows. You have the install script, which is like one single click and it'll go and install. Information about your images are present over here, right? Which is very useful. What type of image, which you need is present here, right? And then we also kind of talked about the process, right? The one which we did. So we started with installing the op stack. We created a VM using op stack, which was very quick. I showed you some very useful use cases of this VM, right? All the SSH part is automated, so you don't have to worry about that. You can mount the volume of your Mac laptop into the VM, right? Very simple. Then we installed Containerlab inside the VM. Then we kind of got the container based cEOS, installed that, and we created a topology with 2 nodes. We configured IPs. We were able to ping the devices, right? So that's mainly what I want to cover, guys. So hope that was kind of useful, right? Do check this one out if you're if you're again stuck on a Mac laptop, and you want to quickly lab things out. I would honestly suggest you to give Containerlab a try. But at the same time, if you want to like build like huge topologies and you really fancy the GUI, then stick to your EVE-NG. I think EVE-NG. Also, I think the pro versions have container support, so I made to check that out. But at least the community version should do a lot good if you are building like huge topologies with all those VM based routers and switches, right? But for Mac laptop, Apple Silicon, go for it. Go for Containerlab. You would really love it, right? Very quick. Okay. Cool. Thanks a lot. And do come back for more content around the networking space. Thanks a lot. Bye.